Welcome to the channel where an average infantryman struggles to understand geopolitics.
Alright, so House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan caused fighter jets to scramble, warships to assemble, and the Chinese Communist Party to have a full-blown conniption. Pelosi's the highest-ranking US official to visit Taiwan in 25 years, a nation that China still believes is in active rebellion against them. But you would think Pelosi was out there shooting down Chinese fighter jets herself based on the world's response.
Communists now threatening Nancy Pelosi over her possible trip to Taiwan.
The U.S. military didn't think it was a good time for the speaker to go.
So we're going to analyze this US-Chinese military interaction through the lens of power projection, which is defined as a nation's ability to use economic, political, and military force in order to influence an event's outcome in their favor beyond their own borders. According to the Taiwan live conflict map here, we see 45 PLA fighter jets and 10 warships responded in naval exercises that were designed to strangle the nation. Japan's Minister of Defense released a map showing the path of the Chinese missiles that were fired over and around Taiwan. We can see much of Taiwan's response was focused on the capital of Taipei at the north of the island. From this response, analysts were able to learn valuable information about how the Chinese operate and how it might be countered, from the advanced weapons that they deployed to the soft power projection tools that they used,
including indirect threats to shoot down the senator's plane. The standoff could be summed up in two schools of thought, the first being Taiwan has every right to host Speaker Pelosi. This is not a provocation, it's just the government doing what government does. We must step up and deter Chinese dictators from launching another unprovoked war. Or, if Nancy Pelosi starts World War III, I swear to God.
So as Pelosi's plane approached Taiwan on the night of August 2nd, the Chinese military responded by scrambling 22 of their fourth-generation fighter jets to buzz across the Taiwan Strait.
According to the Chinese military,
this formation included the advanced Su-30 aircraft, deployed in order to intimidate and scare Pelosi into turning around at the last minute. The Su-30 has a 30mm internal cannon and multiple air-to-air missiles. With just the flick of a switch, it could have potentially destroyed Pelosi's aircraft, which was an Air Force-operated C-40, which was completely unarmed.
I'll admit I did not have this on my apocalypse bingo. I didn't see it ending this way. So first, let's look at how the US projected power in the region, and then we'll look at the Chinese response.
Pelosi was not truly alone out there. Defense officials explained that a system of overlapping rings of protection were deployed. But what does overlapping rings of protection really mean? The first ring is the aircraft supercarrier USS Ronald Reagan, which is the heart of American naval power. It's their ability to project power and influence events like this one.
So I went digging through some pro-Chinese military Telegram channels so I could find this map with the exact coordinates for the USS Ronald Reagan's location over the past week. It's a few days old now, so it's not breaking any operational security rules. Please don't raid my house.
By looking at a live timeline of the position of the USS Ronald Reagan, starting on July 30, they moved into their closest position to Taiwan, right to the east on August 2nd, the day Pelosi was flying in. This puts the carrier within striking distance of any Chinese fighter jets and gives them the ability to scramble jets quickly to aid Pelosi. This was not a routine movement like the US Navy claims. They purposely sailed as close as possible as a message to China. Obviously, they're not going to come out and say that and just say, we sailed next to Taiwan so we could blow up Chinese fighter jets if we had to. Obviously.
Now, these movements could have been planned in advance, but so was Pelosi's trip.
On board the carrier is a squadron of the FA-18 Super Hornet fighter jets, which have superiority in any dogfight.
Video appearing to show Pelosi being escorted by fighter jets appeared all over social media, but it turned out to be false. Another fake video showed the PLA firing warning shots into the air at Pelosi's plane, showing how dangerous misinformation can be. But why do I think the F-18 would enjoy air superiority in the region?
This is in part thanks to a ring of situational awareness provided by the E-2C Hawkeye surveillance radar aircraft, which detects enemy fighter positions and any incoming ballistic missiles for targeting by anti-air defense systems. The second overlapping ring of protection for Pelosi here is the Carrier Strike Protection Group that ensures the aircraft carrier's safety. It's made up of a more maneuverable destroyer and guided missile vessel. The third ring of protection is the big deck amphibious USS Tripoli LHA-7, which carries 20 of the 5th generation Marine F-35B Lightning Joint Strike Fighters on board. My understanding is this vessel has been modified to have more space for aircraft and no actual landing craft on board. The F-35 stealth bomber gets a lot of crap, but it's the only aircraft that could evade Chinese anti-air systems and take out those DF-16 missile launchers on the coastline here. The power projection strategy here by the US was the old-fashioned, classic, by-the-book show of force, which has been useful since monkeys first realized beating your chest could scare an opponent away without fighting.
Now I'll jump into analyzing the Chinese military's response, and then at the end, we'll do an after-action report on who won this standoff. China had already spent the last week laying the groundwork to legitimize this threat that they were truly prepared to shoot down Pelosi's jet. The first tactic was a phone call when Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke to President Biden and said, quote, "Those who play with fire will perish by it. It is hoped the US will be clear-eyed about this."
I wish they told us what Biden's response was to that. "Don't worry, Xi, they don't let me near the stove." An attempt to influence House Speaker occurred on July 30th when China used Hu Jing, their most prominent political commentator, for their state-run Global Times publication as their own mouthpiece. So he tweeted out,
"The PLA has the right to forcibly dispel Pelosi's plane and the US fighter jets, including firing warning shots and making tactical movement of obstruction. If ineffective, then shoot them down."
China's able to use their media to try to sway public opinion in the United States. So Americans would then call for a cancellation of the trip for fear of Pelosi being shot down and World War III being started. The tweet has since been deleted, of course, but not before the US media ran with it.
This week, the nation also reportedly threatened to shoot down Pelosi's plane.
What he's saying when he threatens to shoot down Pelosi's plane.
This very well may not be bluster. You know, it's inconceivable to us that the PLA, People's Liberation Army, would shoot down Pelosi's plane.
I do think the CCP was happy with it and knew the US media would run with that tweet and hoped it would turn public opinion in the United States against the trip. Either way, this situation was so tense that on the night of August 2nd, as Pelosi's plane approached Taiwan, there was 600,000 people tracking her flight on Flight Radar 24, the website that tracks GPS transponder flight data and publishes it live. People were morbidly waiting to see if call sign SPAR 19, carrying Pelosi, would be shot down. But all these attempts by the Chinese Communist Party to intimidate and coerce the US failed. Pelosi landed safely in Taiwan. When Pelosi's flight left Taiwan on August 3rd to finish her tour of Asia, it looked like an obvious geopolitical win for the United States, right? They'd sent the power of the US Navy and called China's bluff.
So of course at that point the whole world went back to peacefully getting along. And that was the end of it.
Except it wasn't at all. The real power battle had just begun. The Chinese Communist Party immediately announced they would be holding military drills in 6 separate locations, which would completely surround Taiwan for a scheduled period of 4 days. Analysts say this amounts to an unprecedented sea blockade of Taiwan,
cutting off the country and their valuable semiconductor chips from the whole world.
And you might think, what's the big deal? It's just a training exercise, a lot of saber rattling, all bark, no bite. But this forces Taiwan to scramble their fighter jets in response, and it puts strain on their forces to operate. It exhausts fuel, money, resources, 24/7 around the clock. Personnel have to be exhausted at a high-tempo mission. And that comes at the cost of millions of dollars. Can you imagine living on one of those islands? You might be convinced to beg your representative to never let another American official visit again. A Telegram news channel friendly to China posted information on the People's Liberation Army's response.
Chinese infantry fighting vehicles were deployed directly to the Fujian beach closest to Taiwan.
It's okay guys, just play around them, pretend they're not here. This revealed that China deployed the advanced Dongfang 16 missile systems to the eastern part of their country's coastline, closest to Taiwan. These have a range of 1,000 kilometers, placing all targets well within range. It was designed specifically to break through Taiwan's missile defense systems. It's where China's spending most of their defense money right now, on these kind of missile systems. And they're made specifically now to evade and go straight through any US-made Patriot PAC-3 missile systems that Taiwan has. It shows the Dongfang 5 intercontinental ballistic missile with a range of 12,000 kilometers. At least 11 of these type of missiles from these 2 launchers were fired over and near Taiwan. Chinese infantry fighting vehicles joined the morning commute on August 2nd, driving down main highways to the coast to get into position for an amphibious invasion. Logistics support trucks were seen being sent by rail at the same time. What instantly strikes me about the Eastern Military Command's equipment is that all of it is brand new and in configuration for amphibious operations, so no extra armor weighing it down. That's the ZBD-09 infantry fighting vehicle. It's an improvement over the old Russian BMP-2 that they used to use. Taiwan's Foreign Minister Joseph Wu said, quote, "China has used the drills in its military playbook to prepare for the invasion of Taiwan.
So from China's perspective, they could be looking at this as a geopolitical win because it gives them an excuse to run these blockade operations more in the future.
It's hard to think of how 23 million people in Taiwan are reacting to this right now. The next post showed us cell phone footage taken from a civilian in what looks like an apartment building. It shows at least 5 full city blocks near the coast entirely filled with 18 of the advanced Chinese Type 99 main battle tanks and a row of 20 logistics trucks mixed in with jeeps armed with machine guns for protection. This clip was confirmed to have been taken from within the Chinese coastal city of Xiamen. At the same time, 14 Chinese warships patrolled the Taiwan Strait and probed the median line. The live fire drills showed analysts China's military capacity has greatly expanded since the last time it fired missiles near Taiwan in the 1996 Taiwan Strait crisis. At that time, they would not have been able to pull this off. This response has shed a lot of light on China's capabilities. China proved that they could refuel their planes in midair, for instance, a difficult flight maneuver allowing them to operate around the clock. Meng Jinping, who is a professor at the PLA National Defense University, concluded that those 6 areas were not chosen by random. They are the exact strategic locations needed to cut off Taiwan's ports and would be in the proximity to attack Taiwan's most critical military bases. These locations where the live fire drills happened would cut off NATO forces if they attempted to help Taiwan. According to the US, China might have lost round 1 here with Pelosi being able to fly in, but Xi Jinping's retaliation would punish Taiwan just enough for him to look strong without jeopardizing their economy. All of his economic sanctions were on food products, curiously allowing the valuable Taiwanese computer chips to continue flowing into China. As of today, August 9th, China has given no indication yet as to when the blockade will end. So who really won this power projection? Was it the United States because they got their way, or was it China because they showed what they could do to Taiwan? According to some geopolitical experts, like Stephen McDonnell, the BBC's China's expert in Beijing, he claims this Nancy Pelosi visit crisis has given China's troops an excuse to now behave more aggressively. Not because the international community thinks that firing missiles over Taiwan is cool, but because Beijing has gotten away with it. If you give them an inch, they're gonna take a whole dang mile. So both sides can kind of claim a win here. No matter what you think of Pelosi's politics, or if you agree or disagree with her decision to visit Taiwan, in the military it doesn't really matter what your personal feelings are to geopolitical events. The average soldier in the US Armed Forces is trained to put their politics aside and complete the mission. That's what's paramount.
I know that might sound very unironically hua, but it's the truth. After action report time, what could be done better here?
Based on the systems deployed by China and how effective they were, the United States military would next time want some next-generation missile defense systems. The US might want to deploy amphibious ships that have actual landing crafts in the region to threaten boots on the ground faster. The stealth bomber assets like the F-35 would be incredibly valuable for targeted strikes against the Daifang missile launchers of China. And now we know the locations where the PLA would deploy them, which is a huge advantage. We learned from this event that it takes China a few days to respond to a crisis like this, but once they get fired up, their forces now have the naval and air power necessary to cut off Taiwan from the outside world in a matter of days.
Some of us also learned that it's House Speaker Pelosi, not Senator Pelosi.
Fortunately, we now have the cold, hard data on how China would attempt to blockade Taiwan, and we now know what systems we could deploy in an attempt to counter them in the future.